Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Give it another minute here. All right, let's get started. Thanks everybody for attending today. With that, I'll let JD take over.
Had myself muted, sorry. Good morning, everybody. Welcome. As Trey said, my name's JD Stevenson. I've been with QRC for about 3 years now. And before that, I came from the Federal Highway Administration. I worked for those folks for 29 years, and the last 20 years of that I spent in the environmental field and team leader for planning, environment, and right-of-way. I've been around for a while, and so I'm going to share with you what we're going to be discussing here today. And let me call that up. Can you see that now?
Yes.
Okay, so what we're going to talk about today is environmental permits in the construction phase. For the most part, these permits are secured during design, but they generate obligations that have to be carried out during construction, and we call those commonly the environmental commitments that have to be carried out. And so there's a definite connection between design and construction, and so we're going to talk about that a little bit today. So like I said, definite connection, design to construction, because all of these permits, certificates, clearances, agency approvals are secured during the design phase, but they generate these obligations that must be implemented, verified, and documented during construction. So we call those environmental commitments, and there's a lot about mitigation, timing, monitoring, protection of resources. But kind of the bottom line here is just because you got a permit, just because you got an approval in design, it doesn't mean the work is done. There's those obligations, once again, that you have to carry out during construction. So what is an environmental commitment? Basically, it's an obligation, like I said, that comes from a law, it comes from permits, it comes from agency approvals, consultations, environmental reviews, and it'll provide the permit, or the commitment will generally specify what must happen and how it should happen and when it should happen. And what they're trying to do with these is avoid, minimize, or mitigate environmental impacts to environmental resource. Some common types that you might see as we go through as you go through environmental commitments, work windows like restricted hours, seasonal wildlife timing, BMPs and SWPPP. I'm sure you're all familiar with those. Noise measures, there's a couple of different noise permits that have to be secured, and there'll be some monitoring or mitigation in those. Tree protection, you got a tree in your project area, you either protect it, relocate it, or even remove it and replace it somewhere else. A lot of monitoring and reporting comes out of these commitments. And then sometimes there's some special field methods that must be utilized when you're in construction. So that's some of the common ones that you might see. Okay, why aren't you moving? There we go. So we're going to start with the state administered permits. And what we're going to do is talk a little bit about what they're trying to protect with the permit. We're going to talk about when one is required as we go through these, who administers them, and then what are the common measures or commitments that you might see in the field during construction. And we'll start with the special management area. All 4 counties have designated some special management areas. You can see it's a pink in this picture here below. These special management areas basically are trying to preserve and protect and possibly restore the natural resources of the coastal zone. And that's why they're there. So if your project falls within one of these special management areas, you're going to need to coordinate with the county for a permit. And in that permit, and this is all done design, in that permit, there'll be things like conditions on erosion control, landscaping, visual requirements. The next one is stream channel alteration permit. And it's tied to exactly that. When you're widening, lining, or redirecting a stream, you're going to need one of these permits. And they're there to protect the natural function of the stream channel. So that's why it's out there. You have to coordinate with DLNR, their Commission on Water Resource Management, to get one of these permits. And some of the things you might see are restrictions on sequencing and temporary impacts, and some stabilization measures that you have to follow as well. And the next one here is a conservation district use application. And this one involves, like on this picture here, the green area that is a designated conservation district. They're trying to make sure that your project is consistent with the conservation goals of this district. So if your project falls within that or will impact it, you have to coordinate with DLNR's Board of Land and Natural Resources. They review the application and make a finding, and you'll see things like limits on vegetation clearing, habitat protection, restoration measures that you have to adhere to during construction. The next one's Coastal Zone Management Consistency Review. This one, there's the state statute 205A Coastal Zone Management, but there's also a federal law, if you have federal funds in the project, a Coastal Zone Management Act that has to be adhered to. So if your project is falling within a coastal zone, that's generally the shoreline to the ocean, you have to coordinate with Office of Planning and Sustainable Development. You'll have to coordinate with FHWA if it's a federal funded project, and there'll be measures that come out of that consistency review that you have to adhere to during construction. Community noise permit. That's the first of those permits that I was talking about earlier. This permit is filed by the contractor, and of course that means you're at least at award and before construction. The permit, you get the permit through the Department of Health, their Noise, Radiation, and Indoor Air Quality branch. You'll see things like work windows. No work before 7 a.m., no work after 6 p.m., no work on Sundays and holidays. If for some reason they absolutely have to work outside of these restrictions, then they would go to the Department of Health and get a variance to be able to do so. Included in that permit are conditions for quieting measures, for limits on what equipment can be used out there, monitoring, and making sure all the exhaust on the equipment is muffled. One quick best practice, if you will, on this would be, if at all possible, if you can take some measurements on the noise levels before construction starts, and then have that in case somebody comes to you during construction and says, hey, it's way too noisy out here. You could run noise measurements again, and you could actually have something to compare against to determine whether or not it really is a large increase in noise. Just something to keep in mind. I believe Lab has the equipment to be able to do that as well. The grading permit, all 4 counties have their own ordinances and rules about this. You'll have to look at each county to see what triggers the need for the grading permit. In this case, I'm talking about Honolulu, and they have anything greater than 50 cubic yards of permanent cut or fill, or 3-foot vertical, or altered drainage would require a grading permit. And once again, the idea is to protect the natural resources around the project from damage or large impacts. And so things you might see that comes out of the actual permit, and it should be secured before you start work, would be following some approved sediment control, erosion sediment controls, and things like grading thresholds that must be met as well. The next one, Harbors Division permit, and this is administered by HDOT's Harbors Division. It's when your project's located near an energy corridor, and the idea is to protect state-owned commercial harbor facilities, ensure that safe, efficient, and lawful maritime operations occur. And so you'll go to the Harbors Division. They will do some coordination with utility companies to approve the plans. So that coordination is very critical. Out of that permit, or included in that permit, will be some things like control on the method, staging, and inspections. Preservation of trees. I mentioned this earlier, and there's a state exceptional trees statute, but each of the islands also have tree preservations of trees there. And the main idea is just that, protecting the trees, especially exceptional trees. So if your project has a tree on it that may be impacted, you got to look at relocating, removing it, and replacing it. And I went with Honolulu. Once again, they have to have coordination. Their ordinance requires coordination with the Outdoor Circle, the City County Parks and Recreation, and Highway DL. Things that you may see are protect the tree with no touch or no grade zones, replace the tree, and remove it and replace it with another tree, or relocate the existing tree. And along with those comes mitigation schedules that you have to adhere to as well. Advanced BWS water commitment. You know, the Board of Water Supply on Honolulu is there to ensure that the public has the quality and quantity of water available to them. And so if your project has landscaping and irrigation, that you have to get a commitment from BWS that they can provide you the needed water for that landscaping and irrigation. And so you will coordinate with them. They will make a commitment or not on whether they can provide that water. And so it's all making sure that your landscaping is approved, that it's consistent with the water plan and a timeline. Preliminary noise study report. This is that other noise type of action that you have to take. This comes from Federal Highways Administration. Their Title 23 CFR 772. It talks about a type 1 project, which is a new roadway on new location or an addition of a major lane. And what we're talking about here is what kind of added traffic noise would occur if you build this roadway, and what kind of impact that would have on the surroundings of that new roadway. You know, definitely in this case, it's a noise study and it starts before construction. And so there will be measurements taken before, and then there'll be predictions on what the new traffic, what noise levels it will cause. And then that, based on that, it's determined whether or not there's an impact. And so out of this report that comes during design will be, if there's impacts, there'll be mitigation measures that must be followed during construction. The next one here is HRS Chapter 195D, Conservation of Aquatic Life, Wildlife, and Land Plants. Definitely this is the state version of endangered species. And of course, the whole idea here is protect those endangered species if they're encountered. Your project's got to comply with 195D. There's coordination and consultation with DLNR's Forestry and Wildlife Division and the Aquatic Resources Division. There'll be correspondence back and forth, and that correspondence could contain measures to protect the species and their habitat during clearing, earthwork, or in-stream work. Okay, we're going to talk a little, or ask this question here. You know, I've been talking about these permits. They generate obligations. There's responsibility to carry these obligations out during construction. And so which statement best describes the construction team's role after environmental permits and approvals have been obtained during design? You can put your answers in the chat pod, if you will. Letter A, construction only needs to follow the plans. The environmental requirements are complete. Letter B, environmental agencies monitor compliance, so construction has little responsibility. Letter C, construction must implement, verify, and document the environmental commitments established during design. Letter D, environmental commitments only apply if unexpected environmental impacts occur. So if you want to, go ahead and put your answers in the chat pod. I'll give you a little bit here. All right, everybody's agreeing on C. All right, I don't want to take up too much time here. We got material to go through. So the answer is C, just like most of you said here. And so the takeaway here is the permits are secured during design, but compliance continues throughout construction here. So very good job. I'm going to switch gears now to the federal side of things, the federal permits and certificates. And we're going to start with the Clean Water Act. And of course, that's the whole idea behind the act is keep water clean. And we're going to talk specifically about Section 401 and Section 404. Section 401 is a water quality certification. It's administered by the Department of Health, their Clean Water branch. It's a federal permit or license, of course, and it's secured before construction. It's needed if your project may discharge pollutants into the waters of the U.S., excuse me. And so it's often, well, it is always required that you have a 401 certification if you've got an Army 404 permit, which we'll talk about next. Sometimes if you have a Section 10 permit from the Rivers and Harbors Act, it is required, and we'll talk about that here in the next slide. Things that you might see as far as commitments are limits on effluent, turbidity controls, monitoring and reporting on all this, and then maybe some construction timing controls. And then the Section 404 permit, this is administered by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the regulatory branch. And as it says there, it's always paired with a Section 401 water quality certification. But in this case, your project is going to discharge dredged material or fill material into the waters of the U.S. And that includes wetlands, and there's some consultation and coordination with the Army for them to issue these permits. Now, these permits could be an individual Section 404 permit, or if your project meets certain criteria, there are a set of nationwide permits that could be used. The nationwides take a little less time to secure, but in either case, there are definite conditions included with those for your work during construction, like mitigation plans if you're impacting a wetland, approved construction methods, and some verification steps that you should watch during construction. Okay, that's Section 10 of the Rivers and Harbors Act. It's when your work is in, over, or under a navigable waterway or their tributary. Once again, the jurisdiction is under the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. It may require a Section 401 water quality certification. And what they're protecting here is it's basically a prohibition on the creation of any obstruction to a navigable water. So if you're working on a bridge of that sort, you're going to have some coordination with Army Corps of Engineer, and through that coordination and consultation, there could be measures like restrictions on temporary work, the need for cofferdams, and other protection measures for the navigation resource. The next one, I'm sure most of you are very familiar with, NPDES, the Construction General Permit. In this case, if your project is going to disturb an acre or more of land that might discharge stormwater into the waters of the U.S., then you're going to have this Construction General Permit. And it's administered by the Department of Health, Clean Water Branch. And once again, we're just trying to keep the water clean. And the things that are required in the field is an SWPPP, sampling and monitoring thresholds, BMPs, There's a lot of inspection and logs and reporting that go along with this one as well. Okay, when your project's out there and there's a wetland and you're impacting that wetland, either taking it or just impacting it, there's got to be replacement in kind, and that replacement can require creation of a new wetland or augmentation of an existing wetland out there. And there's a lot of coordination that goes on for this with the Division of Forestry and Wildlife, with the Division of Aquatic Resources, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and U.S. EPA, all can get involved in this. And that coordination can result in different measures that you have to carry out during construction, such as timelines on the creation of the wetland, things like performance measures that have to be monitored when you create a new wetland, make sure that it survives as a wetland, and things along that line. Section 7. This is the tied to the Federal Endangered Species Act. Requires consultation with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and if there's an essential fish habitat, NOAA and their NMFS. This process can be informal. In certain cases, sometimes it has to be a formal process. In any case, you're going to be going to the Fish and Wildlife Service and securing a list of the potential endangered species that could be within your project area. And you do that through their IPACS website. But this is when there's a federal undertaking. That means there's some federal dollars or a federal decision involved in your project. Things that will come out of that consultation, which is basically correspondence back and forth between Federal Highway and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, or NOAA. Things that might come are avoidance and minimization measures for the species, like work windows, species exclusion zones, monitoring, and reporting. And just as information, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife in Hawaii has developed a paper that spells out avoidance and minimization measures for each and every endangered species in the Hawaii islands. And that makes things a little easier. You can just use that when you're consulting with them on these different endangered species. Okay. Section 106, these next two here are both tied to historic preservation, protecting historic properties. Section 106 is the federal side. It comes from the Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act. Once again, if your project is a federal undertaking, which means federal dollars or federal decision, that may affect historic properties. So that triggers consultation with the SHPD and others, consulting parties sometimes that have a vested interest in the property get involved, but it's led by FHWA. Once again, this is generally through correspondence back and forth, and it happens in the design phase. And out of that consultation comes measures that you must adhere to during construction, like monitoring certain protection measures around a historic property to avoid impacting it during construction. And generally always there's a stipulation that if you run across an archaeological site or human remains that you did not see there before was not known to exist before, then you have to stop work and step back a little bit and do some more consultation. HRS Chapter 6E, that's the state version, very similar, only in this case it's HDOT consulting with SHPD directly. It once again depends on whether there's any significant historic properties within your project area. And if there are, SHPD will develop some measures that you must follow in the field. Once again, very similar. This case, it's preserve an archaeological area, and you might do that by building a buffer fence around the property itself. So, kind of bringing it all together there. We've talked about these permits. We've talked about the fact that they generate these environmental commitments and that have to be implemented, verified, and documented during construction. So it's very important that these get implemented, and we'll talk a little more about why it's important that they get implemented a little later. But we're going to shift gears again here in a little bit and talk about these 5 different areas that we'll talk about some real world measures, environmental commitments that you might see on your projects. The key takeaway, once again, permits and environmental reviews generate these obligations that must be carried out in construction. Quick question. Once again, put your answer in the pod. Which of the following is an example of an environmental commitment that construction may be responsible for implementing? Installing archaeological protection fencing before construction begins. Following seasonal tree clearing restrictions for protected species. Maintaining BMPs and documenting inspections. Preparing monitoring reports required by permit conditions, or E, all of the above. All right. Let's see what the answer is. I think everybody pretty much agrees it's all the above. Those are all types of commitments that have to be carried out in construction. So basically, environmental commitments come in many forms, but they all become obligations during construction. So let's go through some real world situations. In this case, I got a project that was federally funded. It was a federal undertaking, so they had to go through the Section 106 process during design. They coordinated with SHPD, and they looked at the project, and SHPD determined that the project was going to have an adverse effect on the historic property. What that means is probably taking some of the land or doing something to the building itself that would degrade the historical character of the property. When that happens, it's required that you develop a memorandum of agreement, an MOA, and that is required. And within that MOA will be certain stipulations that have to be carried out during construction. And one thing I'll say about MOAs that are important to remember, they have a life expectancy, and it's generally 5 years. But you definitely want to keep a handle on that, and at least 6 months ahead of time start working on getting an extension from SHPD if you're running close on that. So keep that in mind. But some of the stipulations that came from this MOA were the need for an archaeological monitoring plan. It had to be developed and approved by SHPD before ground disturbance started in the designated area. And part of that AMP was the need to hire an archaeological monitor to be around during all ground disturbance. Here's some more of that protective fencing, or clearly marking the area of the historic property to protect it, to be aware of it. And then that stipulation about if you run across archaeological resource or human remains, you have to stop work and notify SHPD. Chapter 6E, this project, roadway project, it had a historic property in the area of the project, and so it required SHPD coordination, and SHPD, through their consultation back and forth, will develop implementation measures for avoidance and protection of that property. Some of the things we saw were established archaeological preservation area once again, build fences, delineate, install protective buffer fencing around an archaeological site, and then follow SHPD developed other avoidance and protection measures identified for the identified historic property. Section 7, in this case, Endangered Species Act, federal dollars in the project. We got our list of endangered species, and I'm going to focus in on one of the items on that list was the Hawaiian hoary bat. As I mentioned earlier, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service provided that paper with avoidance and minimization measures for each of the species. So the consultation with them in this case was informal. It just had to document that we would follow those avoidance and minimization measures for the species identified in the area. For the hoary bat, what you typically would see would be commitment to not use any barbed wire fencing. And the more important one, do not disturb, remove, or trim woody plants greater than 15 feet tall during the bat birthing and pup rearing season, and that's June 1 to September 15. I think there's been cases where you absolutely needed to do work during June 1 to September 15 and to remove some of these woody plants. And an arborist or an expert comes in and they look at the trees and determine whether or not there's any pups in the trees. And if there's not, they can go ahead and take the tree down. So that's something to keep in mind. In this case, we've got an essential fish habitat in the area of our project and required coordination with NMFS through NOAA. So basically what NMFS did through this consultation was determine that if you implement conservation recommendations and FHWA BMPs, and they had some proposed minimization measures, if you implement all of those, then the end result would be no more than minimal adverse effects to the essential fish habitat, which that's a good place to be. And so some of the measures that we saw were inspect and maintain the BMPs throughout construction, minimize work occurring within a stream channel, and prevent uncured concrete or concrete wash water from entering the waters. Okay, another place that I drew from is the NEPA documents. This is the National Environmental Policy Act, and it's anytime you've got a federally funded project, it requires a NEPA document. It could be either a categorical exclusion, an environmental assessment, or an environmental impact statement. So in this case, I'm talking about an environmental assessment, EA. And the main thing I wanted to say here is these type of documents are umbrella documents. They cover all of the environment in general. So a lot of the permits that we just went through, they will cover what the environmental commitments were from those permits in the EA. So you'll see some duplication, but just be aware of that. In this case, I took a few of the environmental commitments out, install, maintain BMPs once again. So that's something we've heard before. Prepare and implement an SWPPP before construction. That's something we've heard before. Maintain spill response equipment on site and immediately contain and clean up the spills. So those type of commitments are what you might see in a NEPA document. Then on the state side, their environmental law requires HEPA documents. And in this case, they're HEPA EAs. And so they include, once again, they're an umbrella document that includes different types of commitments that you have to adhere to. In this case, control fugitive dust through watering and other methods, restrict construction activities to the approved work hours, and maintain equipment mufflers. That's tied back to that community muffler. Our community noise permit, excuse me, and then clean construction equipment before entering the project area to prevent the spread of invasive species. So there's some specific commitments. You know, I've said it several times. You've got to know what the commitment is. You got to implement the commitment. You've got to verify that it's been implemented and document that it's been implemented as you go through the project. Okay, another question. Once project has been turned over to construction, what are construction staff's primary responsibilities regarding environmental commitments? A, assume the contractor is responsible for all environmental compliance. B, keep a copy of the permits in the project files. C, know where the commitments are documented, ensure they are implemented, and maintain documentation proving they were completed. And D, wait until project closeout to verify compliance. So what do y'all think? Okay, looks like everybody's agreeing on C. Know where they are, ensure they're implemented, maintain documentation proving they were completed. And so, whoops, I didn't mean to do that. So construction's job is to know them, implement them, track them, and document them. All right, we're going to talk here. This is the last slide, and we're going to talk here about the importance of tracking and verifying that the commitments have been implemented. And this comes down to closing out the project when you've got everything done. And Federal Highway especially will come to you and say, what all environmental commitments did you have, and show us documentation and proof basically that they've been completed. And so there's at least I'm not aware of any HDOT prescribed method of doing this. I think it's up to your discretion on how you do this in the field. I'm just suggesting here commitments checklist of some sort be developed that has the commitment description, who the responsible party is, the timing, required documentation and evidence, proof that you've done this, and how you verified that. Was it through inspections, reports, photos, sampling logs? And it could be your diary is the best way to document these at times. So definitely that's a way to do it. I'm sure you all have your own ways that you've established. Another way, and I'm just throwing this out there to you, is you're all familiar with ACC, and there's an issues tool in ACC. You're probably familiar with that as well. But you could set up an environmental category in the issues tool, and then you could add each of these commitments to that issues tool and create an issue for each one. And through ACC, you can track and monitor progress in implementing the actual environmental commitment. So with that, I say thank you and open it up for questions. And I'll try to answer or somebody else. Let's see, Andrew.
Yeah, I have a couple comments that the environmental permits that are done during design, I don't think I have not seen it as part of the solicitation for the construction, nor it's being provided to the districts to have to read through and know what's in it. But it could be available. It's normally kept in the design project file. The requirements for the various permits should be in the special provisions and the drawings for the project, so the construction contractor would know what he needs to do to comply with the environmental permits. And the last item I have is that there is an environmental management spreadsheet that should be passed from the design PM to the district, because in some of the environmental permits, it's not just the contractor's work, but the state say needs to notify certain agencies when the construction starts, take photos to provide that shows the evidence of what was done, and other things that is in the permits that the state is required to do, not the construction contractor.
Sounds very good, Andrew. And some of the commitments I know are even included in the plans. I'd say probably wetlands and things along that line. But definitely, the more you can get into the special provisions and into the plans, the better they could be tracked, I would think.
And Andy, can you repeat? You said you guys are using something. Can you repeat like the first part of what you just said? Just the first statement that design is using something. Did I hear you say that?
I said that the environmental permits are not part of the construction solicitation, because the requirements of the permits are picked up in the specifications of what the permit requires a contractor to do, and the drawings. So anything that the contractor needs to do, such as for section 7, don't do work at a certain period of night, or don't exceed certain noise levels, use hand signals, or a fence needs to be put around a historic monument before construction begins. That should be all in the contract documents for the contractor to do. But there are some reporting requirements that the permit requires the state to notify a certain agency.
And it,
And those things are picked up in the environmental management spreadsheet that should be
okay.
given to the district to know what items the state is responsible for as opposed to the contractor.
This environmental management sheet, Andy, I've actually been in your office, right? I've talked to you and Evan about this. I didn't realize we were calling it environmental management sheet, but whatever name we give it, I typed some stuff into the chat. Recall 10 years ago, Misa and I implemented an environmental commitment summary to track everything mentioned so far. Is that an environmental management sheet? Can you email me an example of that?
Yeah, it's the document is EMP. Simple name
EMP, environmental management
plan, I
P
guess. Yeah,
plan.
EMP.
Oh, you guys didn't like ECS, huh?
Yeah, but I don't think that the district needs to be burdened with having to
No.
read every environmental permit. There may be like, I don't know, 15 permits.
I agree. And
But
so I just wanted to know there was something there and we can start the conversation there. I think in this training,
yeah,
Andy, is there anything you can tell the guys about some of those types of commitments that you guys might be following up on that do involve construction, guys?
for my projects that were recently bid, I have put together the environmental management plan information. If you maybe if I want to, I can show that if I share my screen.
Do we have time for that, JD, real quick? Maybe a minute
Oh,
or
yeah.
so?
Yeah, helps so.
Okay.
Andy, I think you're such a nice guy. You might be you might be the first PM to offer it up. Most people
Well,
have a hard time.
I think it's being done before, but it was kind of recently implemented, maybe about less than a year ago, 6 months ago.
Yeah, because Kirsty was helping you guys automate it at one
Okay.
point, so we were getting
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, this is the Waiaka EMP. And if you open that, it has well, I guess the title is wrong, but it has the requirements by subject. So land use, archaeological, cultural resources, visual and scenic character, water resources. So depending on the environmental permit that was obtained, the PM populates this with who the contact is, the responsible party. So there's some things that HDOT is responsible for, some things that the contractor is responsible for. So if the contractor is responsible for doing something to comply with the permit, it should be in the specification or drawings. And it has a column for status. Maybe another example would be better.
So is this something that the project manager assigned to this
Yes.
project during design, which is supposed to see them through? to
Yes.
project closure in some capacity.
So
Is that the
as
responsibility of the PM then to monitor, manage, and update that sheet?
No, it's the responsibility of the project manager to
Okay.
put the information on the sheet. And when the project is awarded, turn over the sheet to the district, to the construction folks, so they can manage what's required for various permits.
And that's where we'll pick up
Okay.
the conversation with
So
you guys.
say there's some for the SMA permit. It says initiate construction by 4/3/27. Evidence of construction shall be submitted to the Maui Department of Planning prior to this date unless time extension is requested and submitted 60 days prior to the new date. Okay, so if the construction isn't initiated and it's say already in construction, transferred to the district, if they don't initiate the construction by April 27, then somebody needs to let the Maui Department of Planning know that we didn't start and we need an extension.
Who's that somebody right now? You're saying it's construction, right?
Yeah, it's not the construction contractor, it's HDOT.
Yeah, no. What this is good, Andy. This is not to fix, but right now, I guess just because of the team who's on this call, that's the kind of thing that I think Federal Highways, on behalf of Federal Highways, think that DOT would be more successful if we didn't hand it over to construction. It's not for you to sort out with you, but I'm just kind of highlighting to this team. It's this part of the process that we were talking with Highway D 6 months to a year ago about changing to make more efficient, right? And less of a load on construction and really place the responsibility where it lies. You get a project engineer, he's never spoke to a planning person in where, Andy, in this example? Who would this construction guy be contacting? In this example?
The Maui Department of Planning.
Yeah, you see how that's not very efficient, right? If the PM was involved in setting things up, having that single point of contact could yield a lot of efficiencies. Yeah. So just use this example.
Yeah, it might not be the a particular person. Is probably maybe inbox or the
well,
email address of Department of Planning.
Yeah, but to take it to a higher level, Andy, I guess I'm letting this team know that's the kind of inefficiencies I was seeking, Misa and I were seeking to address with DOT. And the reason is on a grading, you know how I mentioned the COCOA review last week, I think it was. Was it last week or was it just the other day? It was just the other day, Tuesday, in the construction meeting for those who are there, construction supervisor meeting. It's this kind of a thing that I think would serve DOT better if it was managed by the right group. And right now we got to figure out who that is. And I'm saying it's not likely construction. So it's just one example, Andy, not to say anything's wrong, but for the team on this call, in my opinion, it's this kind of thing that should still live with, say, the PM. So with this sheet, Andy, I didn't realize you guys had taken it this far. I intend to restart conversations with Misa and Henry and Highway DE. Restart, because 6 months ago we were having it when Highway DE was being supported by Kersey, but here now we need to start having it again, because just because they don't have resources anymore doesn't mean it's still not DOT's responsibility. Yeah. So thanks for bringing this up, Andy. Can I ask one last question? The origin of this sheet, who developed it?
I think our environmental, because it has all the environmental commitments.
From DE?
Yeah, I got it from Lawrence, I think.
Yeah. JD, Trey, were you part of the guys helping them? Who was helping them from Kersey?
Yeah, both of us.
Was it you, Trey?
Yeah.
Does that sheet look familiar to you? For JD?
First time
Yeah.
I'm seeing it.
Yeah, I don't,
Okay.
I don't recognize.
Okay, good news then. At least they did something.
Yep.
Correction. At least they did something to address the concerns we had raised 6 months ago. Okay. Thanks for that, guys. Sorry for the tangent, but I hope it's helpful to you guys to have set your eyes on that sheet and realize that they are punting it at the moment. Oh, okay. DOT procedures does right at the moment, Andy, make the responsibility of everything included on that sheet transfer it over to construction, right? At the time of award. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. And that's a conversation I think we're Maza. I intend to take up with Maza as I mentioned to him on Tuesday, and Henry and Highway DE and myself and Misa. So thanks you guys for tying us into it. Sorry, JD, I'm gonna
Nope. Good.
take myself back out of
conversation.
the conversation.
All right, we are out of time. I want to thank everybody for coming. Thank you, JD, for the informative presentation. As always, if there's any trainings you would like us to provide, please reach out to econ@qrc.com, and we will try to accommodate. So take care, everybody.
Hello, guys.
See ya.